who have a harder time to change. So that change is happening. Now, besides that, you still need to run your companies very well. I understand that. And there are other factors that you have to deal with. But don't make it an ESG debate that would be really barking on against the wrong tree. And I've written about that. Unfortunately, the FT published that, and it did get a lot of comments. I have to agree. There are many people still that need to be educated. But you see the same now happening, if I may sidetrack for a second. There's a war going on. The energy prices are going up. Now the financial market is saying, hey, we should be investing in fossil fuel. That's because it's a better investment than in a sustainable future. I mean, what reasoning is that? And how can we just let that happen without speaking up? It's like saying we should all smoke more cigarettes to have population control. I mean, it's bizarre how some of the people are able to manipulate the press to turn some of these things into us moving back to a direction that we know is not going to work anymore. We have to find a way to live within these planetary boundaries. You've seen the IPCC report coming out just one day ago. We have to find a way to have more of an inclusive society. We can't live on these smaller and smaller islands of prosperity in a growing sea of poverty. Any system where too many people feel that they're not participating or are excluded from a process will ultimately rebel against itself. And to some extent, what you now see playing out in Eastern Europe, regretfully, is actually a symptom of that. So we would be very wise together to rise up to that higher level of humanity and put the interest of the common good ahead of our own, knowing that by doing so, we are all better off ourselves as well.
If I may, I think it's a great speech you just did there. Because if you look at what happened with the pandemic, it has pushed us in adopting digital technology in a much, much greater, faster speed. We're much more fluent in using all these tools now, like it or not, but that's what happened. We have transformed ourselves. The same thing is what you're saying now. Should we then say that we need to go backwards and start using fossil fuel again? No, the transformation has already begun. We just need to speed up that transformation. Because going back is not an option. It's the same thing as technology. You don't go back in technology. Technology drives us forward. Exactly what's going to happen in the energy market as well.
Terrific messages, gentlemen. We are out of time. Unfortunately, we needed more time for this conversation, but let's come back in 12 months and do it all over again. Thank you so much.
Sooner, I hope. Thanks,
we appreciate the time. Paul Polman, the chair of Imagine and co-author of Net Positive, Mats Granrud, who is the Director General of GSMA. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now, I will ask you to remain where you are. We are going to continue this terrific session, and we have another guest waiting. We were just going to reset the stage for you because it's a fairly dynamic presentation coming your way, so we may need just a little bit of space for this, but I hope you enjoyed that conversation. I think what jumps out to us as broadcast journalists here on the ground, we came to talk about the big trends around telecommunications, mobile connectivity, and we're dragged back talking about geopolitics and what impact that has on the business community. It's been such a dominant theme for all networks this week, talking about what's playing out with Russia, whether there are geopolitical consequences. And if you think back for the telecoms market, we saw the impact of Huawei when there were tariff sanctions lobbed by the US government, how that reshaped the telecommunications sector and had an impact on progress development. We're still talking about common standards here, whether we have a splinter net, whether that impacts mobility, connectivity, and future. So there are big topics here as we also talk about this journey towards sustainability. It's very hard to talk about one topic in isolation. I must say, as a network, CNBC is very much lent into the messages around ESG, and we are having such terrific conversations of a day about the progress that has been made towards these goals. And if anything, we put a lot of politicians' feet to the fire on their targets. But I'm just going to introduce our next guest now as we talk about the progress that the industry is making. Joining us is a man who has terrific expertise in energy efficiency, and he's bringing that to the mobile sector. Pekka Lundmark is going to join us. He's the president and CEO of Nokia.
Hi, everyone. It's great to be in Barcelona for my first Mobile World Congress as Nokia CEO. And thanks to everyone at GSMA for arranging this event despite the circumstances. Nokia's almost 157 years of existence has seen some real highs, moments of genuine progress for humanity and also for our planet. And we have also seen some real lows, and I guess we all agree that now we are definitely seeing another low. I was shocked by the invasion of Ukraine and the violation of international laws and the use of violence. Collaboration is the best way to improve living standards across the world. Conflict is not. It leads to misery. It's, in a way, you know, it's almost absurd to be talking to you today about anything else while there is a war ongoing in Europe. When I was preparing for this event, I was planning, and I'm still planning, to talk about other significant problems the world is facing and the role of technology in solving them, what we all in this room can do to solve some of these really significant problems. Actually, we rephrased Nokia's company purpose about a year ago. It now reads that at Nokia we create technology that helps the world act together. I have a passion for this topic. And of course, the most important one that we are talking about is climate change. There was a new IPCC report published actually yesterday. It went almost unnoticed for understandable reasons, but it was not pleasant reading. We are not doing anywhere near enough. We are not doing anywhere near enough to deal with the situation. And instead of war games, our leaders should be sitting down together and thinking about what they really should do about this thing. I will get to the technology link between climate change and, as I said, everything that everybody in this room can do. So bear with me a second while I set the scene. This chart that you are seeing here shows global temperature difference from global temperature development between 1880 and then all the way to 2020. The last 8 years were the hottest ever recorded, according to NASA. The global temperature is already about 1.1 degrees above pre-industrial levels. But then, yes, I mean, there is always this question that climate has changed before as well, and is this actually that fast? And there has been ice ages and so on. So let's have another look. Here you see world's temperature development for the last 22,000 years, since the last ice age. And yes, as you can see, there was, after the ice age, there was quite a significant increase in temperature, about 3 degrees globally. Then after that, there was a gradual decline, about 0.7 degrees. But look what has happened few tenths of years. Never in our history has the change been as fast as it has been now. And now we are all, I mean, you have all been listening to these messages about the Paris Agreement, 1.5 degrees, 2 degrees. I mean, all the evidence that we have today suggests that this is going to be looking like more like a 3 or 4 degree world than a 1.5 or 2 degree world. And if I just, to make the point, would now show you that 3 degree warming by the end of the century would look like this. And this may be an optimistic scenario if we don't do drastic and quick action. This may be an optimistic scenario. And if it goes like this, and knowing that there's a lot of interdependencies and different types of back channels in the world, in the globe, and in the atmosphere, in the system that are not even all known to us, who would believe that it will stop there? We all know the reason for this. It's very simple. We pump too much CO2 into the atmosphere, about 50 billion tons each year, and energy production accounts about 3/4 of that. The world uses about 155,000 terawatt hours of energy every year. COVID actually meant that it dropped a little bit in 2020, but now it's coming back again. Here you see the development since world primary energy consumption development since year 1800. And you also see the sources of the primary energy that we are using. Yes, there is a lot of investment in renewables, and that's of course great. And there is also nuclear, which is CO2 free. But then there are countries that are shutting it down, like Germany at the moment, Belgium. But you can see that despite all the good talk and the big investments that we have made, how tiny little part it is. About 80% of our primary energy today comes from gas, oil, and coal, the fossil fuels. So this is pretty dramatic, and when you look at this, you start to realize that how massive this challenge is. There is only one real solution, and that is technology. Now I've showed you a couple of charts that make you despair. So let's now get to the maybe there is hope side of this chat. Let's see how technology can help. Here is one example, and bear with me, I'll explain to you what you will see. The blue lines here show how the World Energy Agency forecasted each year. So this is 2006 forecast for the further development of how much new solar capacity would be installed in the world in the coming years. And as you can see, the forecast was flat, so the same amount to be installed every year, meaning that the development would be linear. And then these are the forecasts that Energy Association has published each year, and you can see the latest forecast. But then the red line is what actually happened. So what we have witnessed is exponential development. And this is, of course, extremely important, because what we are seeing in many technologies, including many technologies that we are all applying in this room, when a new technology really gets going, you can get huge growth, exponential growth, far surpassing even the most optimistic predictions. And I'm, of course, here using solar only as one example. The bigger point is that it's easy to underestimate how quickly new technologies can be adopted and rolled out. And of course, green technologies are improving all the time. They are becoming lighter, smaller, and cheaper, which is really, really good. Now, here we see then, and now since I talked about solar, and you don't see yet solar on this chart, I'll come to that soon. Here you see between 2009 and 2019 how the cost of electricity generation has developed between different sources. You have gas peakers, you have a gas combined cycle, then the gray line is coal, then there is nuclear, which has been creeping up a little bit. Great development, the green line for onshore wind, about 70% drop in 10 years. But then the real champion, solar. So solar has moved from most expensive form of generation, electricity generation, to the cheapest. 89% drop in 10 years, 89%. And this is expected to continue. And many of you may have heard this, but the sun is actually radiating about the same amount of energy onto the earth every hour that the whole globe uses in a year. So that is the source. That is the source. We just need to keep developing the technology and investing. Now, the fundamental challenge with all this will be connectivity. And let me explain why. In the electricity system, there is one very simple and easy to understand rule. Consumption and generation need to be in balance every second. If that is not the case, the electricity system loses its frequency, and then we are in big trouble. So while we want to maximize the share of solar and wind in the grid, it's absolutely critical that we have super good communications networks that will be able to manage the whole thing. The more solar and wind we want to introduce into the system, the more we need high-speed, real-time, low-latency communications networks. What we need to do is to, of course, manage the fact that solar and wind are weather-dependent and hard to predict. And when you combine that with the challenge that I just described, that consumption and generation need to be in balance every second, it means that there needs to be available generation that can balance solar and wind when there is no sun and no wind, or alternatively, which is also getting increasingly interesting, is adjusting demand. Either increase generation when needed or adjust demand down, or then use different types of intermediate storage systems in between. Also a communications network challenge. So what's actually happening right now in the energy system, in the electricity system in particular, is that the whole system is developing from one directional pipe, which went from massive power plants all the way to a passive consumer. This is becoming this one directional pipe is transforming into a highly complex distributed network where potentially every device that is using electricity can become an active node in the system, an active intelligent node in the system. This means that the electricity network and the telco network will be tightly interconnected. The same devices will be connected to both networks, and this provides a massive opportunity for all of us in this room. So what we need is fully digitalized and AI-managed energy systems that can identify who needs energy, when they need it, and then deliver it at the lowest possible cost at the right time. This means that businesses can spend less, they can map their energy consumption in advance, and of course, ultimate goal for households need to be lower bills and ultra-reliable supply, all coming from CO2-free sources. So connectivity is absolutely critical for a more sustainable world. So today I want to give you a glimpse of what that looks like in practice, and I have three quick stories, three quick videos for you from different partners that highlight the power of connectivity in our pursuit of net zero. So let's start on the outskirts of Vienna.
Technology is the key in beating the climate crisis. Without technology, it's not possible to deal with increasing energy consumptions. We need smart solutions. I really think Microgrid can make a difference.
A microgrid is an intelligent energy system that brings together all the information from the different parts of the local campus, for example, and then optimizes on basis of different parameters.
The energy is produced on site via photovoltaic, which we have on our roofs. The consumption is done in a smart way, using the microgrid controller to put the energy where it's needed. The dashboard is showing you the life of the microgrid. You see the production of the energy, the consumption of the energy. And after that, of course, you can analyze all this data and make your building much better. It's a great feeling that we know our energy, which we use on the daily basis, is clean and is sustainable.
So this entire Siemens Vienna campus is covered by that microgrid, which is enabled by our totally secure 5G private network and implemented together with A1. These assets communicate with each other in real time. There are about 1,000 data points from 34 different devices. This automatically controls how much solar energy gets into the grid and directs it to the most optimal use. This one site saves the tons of CO2 per year, and it is going to actually double from that. But the real point is that, because that's not a very big number, the real point is that we estimate that there are about 14 million industrial campuses around the world. 14 million. So you start to get an idea that where the technology will all scale is needed. So let's look at generation side then. And let's turn to North Sea.
Our network here in Belgium is one of the largest offshore networks. It's often a very challenging environment, so it's very important for the people offshore that we can ensure that mission-critical connectivity.
5G for the wind farm. Importantly for us, it's a stable communication. We cannot physically see 100 turbines from one space. By having that communication, the turbine will tell us when something's not right, and we can then react straight away. Without that, we're pretty much dead in the water.
We have turbines of more than 8 megawatt per piece. In total, approximately half of the Belgian households can get electricity from our Belgian North Sea. Technology is the only way to fight climate change. We have come a long way, but now we are getting into a next phase. So we should scale up the technology and really use it as the way to go to a carbon-free society.
So these latest generations of wind turbines are about twice as tall as those installed 5 years ago. That means that the installation is more complicated, maintenance is more complicated. CityMesh is addressing this challenge with connectivity, with investing in connectivity. There is a private network that, of course, unlocks predictive maintenance. Predictive maintenance has been discussed as part of industrial IoT for quite a long time. There's nothing new in that. But what is now possible is to add new applications like drones and artificial AR, augmented reality-based engineering solutions, all in order to increase the productivity and lower the cost of this type of generation. 572 turbines over 530 square kilometers of North Sea, energy for about 1 million homes. And then the final third example, what about distribution? Let's turn to the US.
80 years ago, for the most part, there was no electricity in rural America. So the farmers helped themselves. They formed not-for-profit cooperatives and started financing and building the lines themselves. That was our return to work. They pulled together and formed a co-op of co-ops. And that's what we do here at Wabash Valley.
This house was built in 1869. Whoever was living here at the time, it was a real event for them to be able to get electric power.
Sustainability is something that resonates very well with farmers. Keeping a consistent and dependable electrical source is extremely important.
We're able to bring our kids with us to work, and they're already dreaming up ideas for the future.
We're moving to generation technologies that the fuel comes from the sun, the earth, the wind. So we're very excited about the future. And I feel privileged to be able to serve a small portion of rural America. They've been growing our food there for hundreds of years, and they're going to continue for hundreds of years.
So power generated to over 300,000 homes, schools, hospitals, and businesses across the US Midwest, more and more from renewable sources, powered by Nokia's backbone network that provides service providers standard security and reliability to leverage real creativity at the edge of the grid so that they can construct different types of micro solar arrays and capture biogas from dairy farms and even tap methane from 15 separate landfill sites. So this is an example of an American leader in that form of energy generation. So those three quick examples, but this is of course not only about just energy. Telcos are rolling out products and services that unlock sustainability everywhere. There is of course industrial campus networks like the one that we saw in Vienna that enable more efficient use of energy and very importantly more efficient use of materials. There is network slicing for bespoke digitalization. There are new types of algorithms that dial down energy consumption of assets when they are not used. Home broadband is now using 38% less power than in 2007, despite the fact that speeds have increased by a factor of 64. There is edge computing and intelligence managing exponential growth in network capacity requirements. And then, of course, there is 5G. As we all know, it's improved spectral efficiency, meaning less energy per bit. Our technology vision goes big on the idea of digital twins. We already know about their potential for industry, but what if we think a little bigger? The connection capacity of 5G and then 5G advanced and ultimately 6G will allow us to create a constantly improving feedback loop between the virtual and physical worlds. We'll be able to produce digital twins of cities, nations, even of planet Earth. We could track the growth and recession of forests and polar ice in real time and know the implications in terms of carbon release. We could map the evolution of our energy, transportation, and utility infrastructures over huge geographical areas and model the impacts of overlapping policy developments, knowing exactly what will change and when. So this deep compute real-world metaverse is not the cherry on top of sustainability. It is sustainability itself, and it's all based on connectivity. To support the work of this sector, I have 3 asks. First, the telecoms industry is, of course, constantly developing new tools to squeeze every last drop of capacity out of customers' existing spectrum. But to keep pace with demand, governments need to get their act together and release affordable, this is really important, affordable new spectrum across low, mid, high, and ultra high band ranges, allocated specifically for mobile broadband, allowing industry to connect more and emit less. Number 2, mobilize markets. The only realistic path to net zero involves mobilizing market forces. There is no way how governments or taxpayers could fund all the massive investments that will be needed for the green transformation. The only way to get there is to mobilize market forces. And by far, the best example that I have seen so far is the European Union's emission trading system, which is a very simple and effective system that has already slashed about 1 billion tons of emissions in Europe in about 10 years or so, and it continues. Very simple principle. You emit or launch to the market a certain number of emission certificates every year. That number is reduced year after year, and everybody who wants to emit CO2 needs to buy a certificate. That's the only thing you need to do. You don't need to do anything else. When you control the supply of emission certificates, you automatically drive down emissions, and the markets decide what are the best and most efficient ways of reducing emissions. This is a great example of a system that is delivering, and this is something that should be replicated also elsewhere. And then number 3, do the right thing. While our industry puts pressure on governments to act, of course, we too have a massive responsibility to do the right thing. We need to, first of all, play by the rules, behave ethically, and build trust. In other words, we need to make tech and tech companies a force for good. Environmental sustainability, yes, of course, it's a big part of that. And there's plenty of things we can do. I'm proud that Nokia is committed to 100% renewable energy in our own operations by 2025, and also build and use products that do more with less energy. Energy efficiency is at the heart of our design. We have here made several important launches. AVA Energy Efficiency Service, with AI reducing network energy usage by up to 30%. We have sets for broadband, fixed broadband that cut about half of the power of previous generations. New generation of routing silicon, cutting 75% of power consumption of previous generations. Data center portfolio launch, 66% through innovations in routing platform design. Our new generation of mobile base stations, AirScale portfolio, 75% cut in energy consumption. And today I'm proud to launch the next phase of the base station evolution. And that is our new liquid-cooled base station. Our AirScale now includes a new baseband solution, which is not air-cooled, it's liquid-cooled. Why is this important? Liquid as a transport medium for heat is about 4,000 times more efficient than air. So this new baseband solution, you see some kind of a picture there. The blue line is cold water and the red line is hot water that goes back from the system, reduces energy consumption of the cooling system by 90%, and base station CO2 emissions by 80%. By 80% base station CO2 emissions. So telcos can help others to cut emissions while also cutting their own. So, ladies and gentlemen, the bottom line is this. Digitalization can enable cuts in emissions up to 10 times larger than those of the telecommunications industries itself, telecommunications industry's own emissions, 10 times more in other industries. And I'm proud that our industry has that responsibility. And make no mistake, it's a big responsibility. So let's live up to the trust that has been placed on us. And let's be constantly innovating, doing the right thing, and yes, let's also try to move a little bit faster. Ladies and gentlemen, there is no green without digital. Thank you.
Pekka, thank you for such a wide-ranging presentation, touching on so many interesting points. We appreciate all the effort you put into that presentation and for sharing with us at Mobile World Congress. You mentioned a couple of things in your speech then. What jumped out to me was corporate responsibility, innovation, ethics. You mentioned a number of times about doing the right thing. Just walk us through the developments in recent days where you decided to halt deliveries to Russia.
Well, it is part of doing the right thing, absolutely. I mean, we just need to make sure that we always respect human rights, international law. We do not accept any violations of that. I mean, that's extremely important. It is part of the corporate social responsibility, absolutely.
You work with a number of players in Russia, and in particular, there was an announcement just a couple of months ago about installing 4G and 5G base stations with one of the local operators, Yadro. Just tell us how this plays out, because all the innovation in the world trying to hit sustainability targets doesn't amount to much if the innovation doesn't leave the factory, it doesn't go onto a ship, it doesn't get installed in a country. Where does it leave these types of business ventures?
As I said already in the presentation itself, I mean, the world leaders should really be focusing on innovation and sitting down together to creating a world system to slash emissions as quickly as possible instead of being in war games with each other. So it's of course an extremely sad situation. Hopefully that would be resolved as soon as possible, that we would go back to the normal. But right now it is very difficult.
What jumps out to me, and I mentioned this as I was introducing you, at Mobile World Congress, we've spoken before about the geopolitics. For instance, the Huawei situation, they were cut out effectively from doing business in a lot of Western markets. It provided an access point again for Nokia to claim market share. Are we looking at that situation again, where there are parts of the world where you just cannot do business, where the Chinese may say bulk up, for instance, where there is a void left by companies like yours and Ericsson?
Hey, look, I mean, what is really important for us is that we want to position ourselves as a trusted partner for our customers and for anyone who wants to buy our solutions. And we understand that the safety and reliability and the security of the vendor and the sustainability contribution of the vendor, they are all increasing a lot in importance. We are not the political player. We are not a geopolitical player. We want to focus on the thing that we are able to do.
Let me ask you a little bit about sustainability then, because you bring such strong credentials to the table, having worked with the energy solutions for so many years. And that's not necessarily an area where a lot of mobile telecom CEOs have experience. What can you do as we race towards net zero? How do we tackle that energy efficiency equation?
Well, I mean, one thing is, of course, that all the I was talking about chipset and other stuff. I mean, that's kind of the normal bread and butter technology development. But what makes me so excited about this opportunity is the fact that the telco network and everything that the people in this room are doing can actually become not only a passive user of electricity, but can be become an active part, an active element in the energy system, and that way be actually a significant contributor to the reduction of CO2 emissions and to the improvement of overall efficiency and sustainability.
We were talking in the comments beforehand, where Paul Polman weighed in, and we heard from Matt Granvard about the spike in the oil price. whether that causes people to sit back, make more investments in fossil fuels, and really just kicks out into the long grass some of these energy targets. Are you concerned about that? Is there a possibility as you work on all this innovation that in fact people reach for old solutions because it's easier, it's more efficient, given the threats from higher energy prices?
Well, right now, if the world is focusing on war games, I mean, that is a real possibility, but hopefully we would soon get back to the normal. And there I would really ask for smart regulation, because businesses act if there is smart market-based regulation. And that's why I arranged the European emission trading system as a good example. What the government should really do is to put regulation where they, by law, restrict the approved, accepted amount of emissions. And then after that, simply let the markets find out the right solution.
Can I also ask you about the metaverse? Because you brought up an example there. I think a lot of us at this conference are thinking about the metaverse as avatars that you can use in social media, perhaps in gaming, more e-commerce. But you used an example there as a digital twin. Are we having the wrong perception in a way about what the metaverse could mean to businesses like yours?
I don't think we're having a wrong perception, but the consumer and gaming side is only one part of it. I think that and there's nothing wrong with that. Oh, that's cool, but potentially significantly more important for the world would be really, I mean, not only the industrial digitalization, industrial digital twins, but then working towards having a fully digital twin model of the whole world, and that way being able to, in a way, model and monitor in real time that how are we actually doing in, for example, in the areas of sustainability. And again, this is where all you here in the room and in the audience come in, because we need to build the infrastructure. And it is not only the infrastructure of today. We're going to need to put in a significant investment into the next generation of infrastructure. And that investment is one of the best investments that the world can make for sustainability.
Just finally, let me ask you about the chip shortage, because as we talk about more connectivity, it feels as though we need more and more chips, and some of the innovations here in particular, very much towards that narrative. But it feels as though we're still battling some of the headwinds around supply chains, and maybe they just got worse too as we talk about energy inflation and the problems with Russia. Are you concerned that this goes on much longer than anticipated, steering us off course again from sustainability and innovation targets?
I mean, semiconductors are, of course, fundamentally important as an enabler for all this. And there was, I think the number was like 40% increase in global demand in just a couple of years, which was something that nobody expected when the pandemic started. Exactly the opposite happened. And now the semiconductor industry is putting in massive investments, and there is more planned. There can still be shortages there, and it's still a very tight situation. It could start easing a little bit towards the end of the year, but most likely it will still take some time before we are back to normal. And then depending on what type of semiconductors you are talking, there could be longer term shortages also. But I believe that our industry, we at least, and our colleagues, that we are able to deal with it. And here also our message to politicians has been that you need to understand not only the footprint, but the handprint of the communications industry if you intervene in markets. Because again, our handprint is 10 times our own footprint to the positive. So we do a very good thing, and we deserve the priority also in the allocation of semiconductors in the world.
Pekka, thank you so much for your time. I think the audience is getting a glimpse at why your stock has been performing so well, and why you've steered the company back towards being such a competitive player in the 5G market and in telecoms. Thank you so much for your time. Pekka Lundmark with us.
Thank you.
Global Practice Leader for Network and Edge, Paul Saville. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
How have traditional networks made it difficult for businesses to react to changing business dynamics and take full advantage of multi-cloud and edge?
Well, the problem with legacy type networks is just that they're inflexible. You know, they've been built with architectures that involve hardware that's separated from the software. In these days, you'd have to deploy a router, a physical device on the customer premise. You had physical circuits at layer 1 and layer 2 that were connecting everything together, made it very hard for networks to be flexible and to be able to move around. With SDN technology, that changes things, and a lot of the over-the-top type technology is enabling us to reconfigure networks on the fly and make them much more easier to use.
What's the significance of edge when it comes to Industry 4.0 and digital transformation?
Well, the advent of edge compute is really enabling enterprises to take advantage of another type of architectural construct that gives them more optionality in terms of building out different types of performance criteria and operational cost structures. It's kind of like establishing a third landing spot that gives them an additional alternative for how they can configure their networks together and tie together with compute and distributed applications.
So you've recently partnered with Nokia. Could you tell us a bit more about that as companies are looking at industrial 5G and private networks?
Yes, our new partnership with Nokia is very exciting because basically together what we've done is we've created an ability to deploy at a global level private 5G networks for enterprises. This private 5G technology is really exciting, and the potential that it has for enterprise customers to use it and configure it in different ways is really amazing, but it's hard for them to deploy. When you think about going and having to acquire the spectrum, do the radio design, do the deployment on site, connect it up to local area networks and wide area networks, that's a pretty big job for many enterprise IT departments to handle. And so Kyndryl and Nokia together have put together a turnkey solution for enterprises to solve that.
So now Kyndryl's separate from IBM. What's changed?
Well, what's changed is that Kyndryl has the freedom to do a lot more things that they want to do. We have the ability to now go out and partner with different companies in a way that we've never been able to. You may have seen that we have recently announced multiple new alliance relationships with all of the hyperscalers, with a number of companies that we've been wanting to work with for a long time that really enable us to introduce technology that allows us to continuously scan the technology landscape for our customers and recommend the best technology solutions for them.
That's great. Thanks for your insights.
Thank you.
This is Mobile World Live. You're joining us here in Barcelona, getting towards the end of day 2, so very nearly halfway through MWC 22. And I'm here in hallway 4, right near the keynote stage. Keynote we're going to talk about now, a lot about sustainability, climate change, renewable fuels. Mike was in there watching it for us. I'm talking about climate change and that, but actually energy security was top of the list for them.
Yeah, it was brought up. The gentleman from Paul Pullman, who wrote a book called Net Positive, it came out in late 2021. This gentleman was actually the CEO of a company for a long time where he instituted a lot of this. But, one of the things that's happened with what's going on with Ukraine is the price of gas is going up. So he said there's this call from investors to do more with fossil fuels. And he said, that's like telling a smoker to smoke more cigarettes. We can't be sidetracked by a call for more fossil fuels because of a temporary bump in the price. So his point is companies that think about diversity, think about inclusion, think about climate change are better companies. They do better, they're more profitable, people want to work there. Let's work towards that. Let's put the pressure on the companies that aren't doing that. And then Matt Grinyard, the director of GSMA, also talked about how smart mobility can help factories be more efficient. They can cut down on the times when they're running. They can know when something is wrong. So that's something that they need to look at as well. So with the whole thing with climate control and all the pollutants, CEO up there as well, he's been there since 2020.